We are going to start. Okay. I wanted to focus on get this manual. Okay, let me get my notes. And we shall begin.
Okay, when you're
Okay,
ready.
feel free to drink your coffee. I'll drink mine.
Yep.
Okay. So, today, and just let's always keep eye contact. Today is the 24th of December,
Yes.
2014,
Mm-hmm.
and we are at the home of Avi Grant.
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 Avi Grant in Raanana, Rehova Palmach 10,
Mm-hmm.
and Avi Grant, Gimel Reish Nun Tet.
Yes, okay.
Today is the 24th of the 12th, 2014, and we are going to begin. I started reading over your written material here that you wrote back in 2008, and we're going to use this throughout our whole interview as a guideline,
Okay, fine.
and we're going to go chronologically through what you have. Just a second, hold on. Barbara, we're good. So, yes, you can definitely sit here, not a problem at all. But it's just important for you and I to have our eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put on my glasses, because that will help me. So, Avi, tell me when you were born, where you were born,
Where I was born.
and your family's background.
Okay, fine. I was born in Leeds in England, 14th of January 1927. My father was a clerk in the income tax part of the government. My mother kept a kosher house, though we weren't particularly from, but everything in the house was kosher. So that was my origin. I spent the first 10 years of my life in Leeds, in England.
Can you tell me where Leeds is exactly compared to London?
Yes, it's north of London, 200 and something miles north, right in the middle of the country, in the middle of Yorkshire. It was an industrial town. The main employment in Leeds at that time was tailoring. Many Jewish refugees came to Leeds during that time and got jobs in either Burton's or 50 shilling tailors or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
These were big factories. Burton's had shops all over the country where you could go in, be measured for a suit, choose your cloth, and have a suit made to measure for something like £3. There was another one with 50 shilling tailors, again all in Leeds. So that was my background. My father's parents came from Russia.
So your father was born
In
Leeds.
England.
So you're second generation.
I'm second generation English.
And can you just tell me, for the record, the name of your father?
Morris?
Morris Grant.
Yes. No. Morris Goldberg.
Okay.
The family name was Goldberg. I changed that. Do you want the story as to how I changed that name?
Well, we'll get to that, but we're going to go chronologically. So
Okay, fine.
So you're actually born.
I'm born Aubrey Cyril Goldberg, and we've come a long way from there.
And your father's name is Morris.
Morris.
And he's born
Morris.
in Leeds.
Sorry?
And he was born in.
He was
Leeds.
born in Leeds. Yes.
Wow.
I can't remember the date of his born. 18 something or other.
And your mother?
My mother. I don't know a great deal about my mother's family, in spite of the fact that I actually lived with my mother's mother for some years.
Yes.
Her family had been in England for many years. They weren't part of the emigre from Europe at that time. She was born in Middlesbrough. And as I say, I don't know much about my mother's mother, except she was a very fine woman. Very fine indeed.
So you're second generation on both sides. Both of your parents are born in the United Kingdom.
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Interesting.
Yep.
And both sides of the family came from Russia.
No.
Okay.
No, my father's side of the family, they came from Russia. Somewhere about 1880. My grandfather came from Russia. I've actually got his naturalization certificate signed by Winston Churchill as Home Secretary in 1900 and something. I've got other. He came. The background there was that he was one of 4 brothers. He was born somewhere about 18.
I just need you to turn towards me. Yeah.
Somewhere about 1880. No, earlier than 1870. And when the pogroms were going full swing in Russia, he and his 4 brothers set out for America. They intended to go to America. He was the eldest of 4 brothers. They walked halfway across Russia, and they got on a boat somewhere in the Black Sea, which was supposed to take them to America. And after some days at sea on this boat, the boat eventually came into a port. It was a smallish boat. The captain said, "This is America, everybody off." Everybody was chased off the boat. It wasn't America, it was Hull in England, a port in England. But the ship just sailed off again. And these 4 brothers were left, standing on the dockside, as it were.
This is your grandfather?
This is my grandfather, with his 3 younger brothers. The Jewish organization at that time was pretty good.
Hold on. We're gonna have to. Sorry about that. We're gonna continue. We took a little break. So you were telling me about your 4.
My forefathers.
Actually, your forefathers and the story of your father, your grandfather, and his brothers.
That's right.
So you're, like I said, you're second generation on both sides. Your father's side is from where? Do you know?
My father's, I know exactly where, from Russia.
Yeah.
But I can't pronounce the name. It was a time which was right on the Russian-Polish border, which was sometimes in Poland and sometimes in Russia. But I can't pronounce the name, but I know what it is.
Perhaps it's in Galicia or somewhere.
I can't tell you any more than that.
Okay. And so your father is a civil servant?
He was.
Yeah, he was a civil servant?
Yes, he was.
Working for the income tax?
Correct.
Correct.
Working for the income tax people.
Working for the income tax people.
In fact, he was very highly regarded in the income tax in England. He actually invented the pay-as-you-earn tax system, which he submitted to the commissioners of Inland Revenue, or the big bosses there, just after the Second World War. Just after the First World War. And they adopted it. And when he was killed, which I'll come to in a moment, they sent me a very, very nice letter about praising him for what he'd done. He was highly regarded.
Now, you have a sister also, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
She's younger than you?
5 years younger.
And her name?
Muriel.
Muriel Goldblum.
Goldberg.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And just for the record again, you were born in 1927?
1927, correct?
1927, what month?
January.
January.
Mm-hmm.
January 1927.
Mm-hmm.
And you're born in a city called Leeds. Can you just give us a background of what kind of city Leeds is?
What kind of city it is?
Yeah, what kind of city is it?
It's a typical provincial town. In my day, it was an industrial town.
Just a second. What is that beeping?
Nothing.
Okay.
In my day, it was an industrial town, mostly with tailoring and cloth.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
I think it's coming from the kitchen.
And it was actually a coal mining town. The tailoring was more for the Jewish population. And the other people.
So
It's not lovely. It's from here,
It wasn't a coal mining town, though.
wasn't it?
No. There was a lot of coal mining in the area, but Leeds wasn't specifically a coal mining town. I have to put up with this.
yeah.
Are we ready? Go
Yes,
ahead.
we're just trying to find this beeping noise.
Beeping, I don't know what it
No, it's from.
is from over here.
Okay. We'll get used to it.
I can't hear any beeping.
Yeah, there's a beep. Hold on.
Stop now. There's the fridge in the background. Now it's started. No, it is the kitchen.
No, it's not.
It's over here. I think it's over here somewhere.
Avi, please sit.
I'm saying,
Yeah, can you do
there's nothing there.
this?
I don't know. Does this thing beep?
What is
Oh,
it?
wait.
Oh, it's the clock. It's the clock.
The clock beeps? Yeah.
It's not beeping, it's like ticking. It's the way it ticks. It's the
You're going to
clock.
stop it?
Okay, whatever.
We can stop it. How do you stop
No,
it?
forget
Just hold it still for a minute.
Right, there you are.
Excellent.
I made that.
Did you? Yeah. So you know. So let's get back to Hold on. Hold on.
Leeds was regarded as a woolen town, not a mining town.
Okay. So Leeds is a middle class prevention.
No, it had a middle class section, it had a very large working class section, and a very small upper class in those days. It was a big Jewish centre. I don't know how many Jews there were there, but we're talking in terms of the thousands. Maybe 25,000 of that order, would you agree? Of that order of 25,000. There were quite a few shuls. Very interesting to see the sequence of the shuls, because in the early 1900s, the shuls were in the centre of the town, and as the Jewish population increased, the shuls started to move towards the outskirts, and you get quite a few of them there.
That's very typical of where I'm from. Also, I'm from Detroit,
Yes,
and the old shuls were all in the center of the city, and then
That's
slowly,
right.
they started
moving out.
as the communities got a little bit more stable and
Yes.
a little bit more influential, and a little bit
A little bit
that's
more
very-
prosperous.
Yeah. Now, so what kind of sect of what kind of part of Judaism do you guys belong to? Probably, mostly Orthodox.
We were. My mother kept a kosher house. We didn't go to shul every week, not at all. I would say about for the main festivals,
High holidays.
the high holidays, and occasionally for weddings and things like that, but no more than that.
No more than that.
No. But my mother did keep a very strict kosher house. When I was young, she had to walk quite a long way to buy kosher chickens, which were slaughtered on the spot for her. I'm going back now to 1930, say.
1930.
In 1930, my mother had to walk probably a mile to a chuck shop. And in the chuck shop, there were live chickens. They were all sold live. And it was a collection of old women. So she would pick her chuck by feeling its breast and all that kind of thing, and hand that
You
over.
remember going with her?
Yes, I used to be pushed in the pram to go there and watch all this. And then the live chicken, would be handed over to somebody in the back room, who had killed it. And then it would be passed out to 3 old ladies who sat in the shop plucking. And they plucked away amongst piles of feathers on the floor.
So by the time you'd pick the chicken to the time you would get it,
Mhm.
how long would it take?
Half an hour.
Not bad.
Oh, of course, but that kind of time.
Not
Well,
bad for a
well,
fresh
three-
chicken.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll wait a half hour for a fresh chicken.
Yes, well, that's how it
And
was.
you remember that. And it was,
Vividly.
it was a Jewish shochet in Leeds where,
Yes.
where your mother went to, and you would walk back with her.
That's right. And I wouldn't walk. I was too young.
Okay.
In
you
the
were
pram.
In the carriage. And,
Yes.
and would you say that your family was middle class, lower middle class? Like, where were you guys?
I would say at that time, I would say lower middle class.
Lower middle class.
My father at that time was a clerk in the civil service, as I told you, but he was a young clerk.
Okay.
He had to make his reputation there. But he did make a reputation, and he was regarded as one of the top clerks in the country. And in 1938, he was promoted to be in charge of the largest income tax area in the country, in Birmingham. And we moved to Birmingham for that, and that's how he was killed.
Well, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. So you live in Leeds from when you were born till around 10.
That's right.
Is that correct?
Correct.
What kind of school do you go to?
An ordinary, one of the local schools.
Public.
A public,
Yeah.
what you would.
Yeah.
Yes, a
You went to school with kids who were not Jewish,
that's right.
and
I would have said that probably between 30% of the boys who were in that school were Jewish.
okay.
It was a very Jewish area,
Okay.
and we lived in the middle of a Jewish area.
Okay.
Maybe even more than 30%, maybe 40, even 50%. The name of the school was Cowper Street. It was, in England at those times, schools were named after the streets in which they were in. So this was Cowper Street. I also went to Talmud Torah. After school finished about 3 or 4 o'clock, there was a Talmud Torah opened up, and all the Jewish boys, not all, but certainly amongst we all went to the Talmud Torah.
Tell me about Talmud Torah.
Talmud Torah was horrible. Talmud Torah was run by these guys with long black beards and black hats and canes. And,
From the old country.
well, that kind of thing. And you sat at your desk and they taught you very well, actually. But if you made a mistake, these guys used to walk up and down with a cane in their hand. And one mistake and you got whacked. So you rarely made mistakes. So even to this very day, I can remember the things which I learnt there.
Like what?
Like how to decline verbs. Ani kotev, ata kotev, at kotevet, anachtu kotevim, and so on, and so on.
So at Talmud Torah, what was the curriculum? Was it religious? Was it Zionistic? Or was it just to give you the language?
No, it was religious, very religious, almost entirely religious.
No Herzl, no this, no that?
Not in the Talmud Torah. In addition to that, there were lots of Jewish organizations. For example, I belonged to the Jewish not Boy Scouts, but Cubs.
So what was it called? The Jewish
Cubs.
Jewish Cubs.
Well, it wasn't. It's difficult to describe.
C-U-B-S? Cubs?
Yes.
Cubs.
Young wolves.
Young wolves.
Yeah, a young wolf is a cub.
All right, so Jewish Cubs, and it was like,
It was
that was more fun.
Oh, that was part of the Scouts movement.
Okay.
It was strictly part of the Scouts. You were in the Cubs until you were 11 years old.
Okay.
And we used to go there once a week and do all kinds of things. Earn badges and for woodwork, walking, whatever. In addition to that, there were Zionist organizations.
So the Cubs wasn't Zionist?
No, the Cubs wasn't
It was
Zionist.
just social?
It was social for boys.
For boys. But
Yeah.
before we get to that, so Talmud Torah, did you go there once a week, twice a week?
Every night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not Friday, and Sunday mornings.
What a pain.
It was just, that was
And
life.
that's where you learned Talmud?
Yes. No, I didn't want to learn, never learned Talmud. We learned Siddur.
Siddur. So it was okay.
I could translate the
And
Siddur.
this is in Leeds?
In Leeds.
This is in Leeds.
Mhm.
And are you going, so you said that there was Talmud Torah, the Jewish cubs,
Mhm.
and then there was,
Habonim
okay.
and B'nai Brit.
Which one did you belong to?
Habonim.
Habonim, of course. Habonim. Of course. Tell me a little bit about Habonim. Habonim must have been a little bit more enjoyment than
Oh, it
Talmud
was.
Torah.
Talmud Torah was hell. It was the thing. But the Habonim was great. It was like a club, and you went and you sang songs and you danced in circles, and you learned a bit about Palestine, as it was then, and so on.
So you're quite active. Like your parents made sure that you had a very vast upbringing when it comes to your Jewish identity.
In Leeds.
In Leeds, yeah, we're talking about Leeds. We're not in Birmingham yet.
Yes.
We're talking about before the age of 10, up to the age of 10.
Leeds was a very social society, there was a very strong Jewish life in Leeds. The Jews in Leeds at that time did form more than one community, but there was a Jewish community, and within the Jewish community there were groups.
Okay, can you tell me about these groups?
Yes, there was. Don't quite know how to describe it. I'll try. There was the Chapeltown group, the group that lived in Chapeltown, and they went to either the new shul or one of the other shuls in Chapeltown. There was the Moortown group. They were more upmarket, they were wealthier. They lived in bigger houses, and so on. And then beyond that, there was the All Woodley group. They were the ones who played golf. And they were that bit. They were the main groups. There was still the original group of the original Jews who came to Leeds very early on, in the early 1800s, and so on. That's what my grandfather belonged to. Sorry?
Early 1900s, not the 1800s.
1900s.
Okay.
Only 1900s, whenever. Okay. So there were, but all those groups.
Oh, sorry. Come in.
Yes.
Sorry, you're not
All those groups. There were certainly, I won't say there were closed groups, but if you went to live in that area, you kind of automatically joined in with that
It
group.
was like a country club.
That's right.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
like if you're not in this part of society,
There was also a country club.
for Jews in
Yes,
Leeds.
yes.
Yeah.
The background was that there was a country club in Leeds, but they wouldn't allow Jews to join.
Of course.
So the Jews set up their own country club, which is still running to this day.
It's still running till this day. What's it called?
I don't know what it's called,
Okay. It's in
but I know
Leeds.
it's there. It's
in
a golf club.
Yeah.
That's it.
So this is 1927 to 1937. You are in Leeds.
38, actually.
In your house,
Mm.
do your parents, and we're talking only about Leeds now, we're going to get to Birmingham very soon.
Yes.
Do you remember any talking about Palestine?
Oh, yes.
Did you have the
Blue box.
tzedakah box, the
Yes.
blue box?
Yes.
Please tell me.
We had we were very, very conscious of Palestine and Zionism.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the blue box on the mantelpiece, and every Friday we used to put some money into the blue box,
Yeah.
which was the routine, and the what do you call them? I can't think of the name at the moment. The people used to come around into the blue box every so often. Schnorrers. The schnorrers used to come. Have you heard that word before?
Yeah.
Yep.
Of course.
They used to come once a week for collect their money, empty the blue box, and so on.
So you told me that you remember that the word Palestine would come up. You were aware of what was Palestine and
Yes,
the British mandate there, and
yes, very, very much so.
tell me,
Very much so.
do you remember anything your parents talking about in particular? Some sort of incident, maybe one of the white papers or maybe
Yes.
one of the...
No, I can't say I remember
Okay.
that. I can't say I remember that.
But you do remember that in the house,
We were very conscious of Israel, very conscious of Israel,
Palestine?
for Palestine as it was then, and we contributed money towards it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I can tell you any more than that.
Okay. Okay. And again, your sister, she's 5 years younger than you?
Yes.
And you're...
In Habonim, we learnt about how Palestine, about
Please.
Palestine, and about the settlements. I can't say that a great deal came back. But I can tell you that at one Purim, when I must have been about 7 years old, there was a pseudo quiz. It was like a little concert. And my part of this concert was to answer the question, what is the Balfour Declaration? And I had been primed in advance that this was going to be my question, and I knew it off by heart. And I can't remember it to this day, but that was one thing. Another thing, I was also primed for Purim to sing about Mordecai, which this I remember. It was Haman, oh, Phi, I Mordecai, the Yiddish guy. And that goes back to when I was 7 years old, that thing.
Wow.
But that's the kind of thing that went on.
Wow. Very interesting. It's amazing how much one can remember these little details about childhood. So you would say that altogether in Leeds, you had an amazing, luxurious life, but you were comfortable, you had warmth, you had security, you had education.
I've got good reason to think that my mother was always short of money. My father didn't earn, at that stage, did not earn a lot of money, far from it. Whereas my uncles seemed to earn a lot of money and they seemed to live wealthy. And my mother was always worried about, not worried, but needing more money than she got. So that was where my status was. Well, I don't think I can say any more about that.
Okay, and of course you grew up during the Depression.
No.
The Great Depression.
Ah, yes, but my father had
1929 to 1933.
That's why my father was in the civil service. Because in the service, once you got in, you were there for the rest of your life.
It was a form of security.
More than that, he looked forward. He worked for his pension.
Of course.
He was a very keen gardener. We had a big garden. He was a very keen gardener, and he wanted to spend all his time in his garden. And that was his main reason for staying there. And he wanted me to go into the civil service, into his branch, to work hard and have a good pension.
And to marry a Jewish woman.
Exactly so.
So, before we get on to Birmingham, is there anything else that you want to mention about
Leeds?
About Leeds, about some sort of memories that you have that are connected to your identity?
Yes, very much so.
Zion?
There's one very, very strong memory.
Okay, please.
Oh no, that came later. I'll tell you later on.
Okay. So now we're going to leave Leeds behind and we're going to move
to Birmingham.
So in 1937, 1938, you moved to Birmingham.
Yeah.
Birmingham.
That was the time of the coronation.
Job.
Sorry?
Did he get promoted? Was it?
Yes, he got
job?
promoted.
Okay.
He was promoted at that point to the biggest biggest department in the income tax division, the Inland Revenue. Barbara, can you pass me that crack? Sorry about that. There, back again.
Yeah, we're good.
He was promoted to to the biggest area in the country. And I remember the commissioners telling him that they couldn't promote him anymore. That was as high as he could go.
Why?
Because he didn't have a university degree. That was the only thing that held him back from going much higher than that. That's why. And he wanted me to get a university degree. It didn't matter which subject, and then to go into the civil service. Because I could then go in at a level above him. That was 38.
What kind of city is Birmingham? Are you upset about the move? You're a young kid.
I was more than upset about it. In Leeds, I had lots of friends. In the street, the very street where I lived, I had 2 friends across the road, another friend next door, other friends down the street, and we were all a kind of a gang, and we lived next to a park, we would play in the car, and so on. When we went to Birmingham, firstly, my father couldn't afford to live. The prices in Birmingham were much higher.
Really?
Yes, it was a bigger city.
Okay.
It was actually, at that time, it was the second biggest city in England. Big city. And house prices were high. And he couldn't afford to buy a house there. So we couldn't live in the Jewish area. And we lived in another area. He bought a house which was very good because it was right across the road from a school, and a good school at that, so that was very good for me and my sister, but away from the Jewish area. Now what was I going to say about that? Yes, so when we moved there, I was 10 years old at the time, and at 11 years old, you took an exam which decided which school you went to after the school you were in at that time. So I only had a year in that school, not long enough to make any friends of any volume. I had one friend, a guy called Kenneth Tynan, who became a music critic in England many years later, and he was my very good friend. But he was the only friend I had. I knew other people, but there were Jewish people who I'd met casually. One of them actually came to see me a few years ago here, but they weren't real friends. They weren't real friends as they had been in Leeds, and I never established that relationship with friends again. I was on my own all the time.
And when you, so tell me about this exam. Did you,
I did very well in it.
You did very well?
Yeah.
And where did it direct you to, because these are exams that say you go to a technical school or you go to this kind of school, or?
That's right.
So what was your path?
My path was to go to a grammar school.
A grammar school?
Which was the highest level you could get to. My father never believed I could make it. And he had me.
Was he proud of you that you did?
I think he was. He never told me.
He never told you?
No.
No.
But whatever I did for him was never good enough.
Is that true?
Yes, very true. Very true indeed.
Was he a tough person?
I think he was. But years later I came to realize that he wasn't half as tough with me as his father had been with him.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. So you're in Birmingham. Birmingham, is it south, north of Leeds?
Right in the middle of the country.
Right in the middle.
South of Leeds.
South of Leeds.
Yes, and there's another thing about that as well. In those days, there was no television or anything like that. There was the beginnings of radio. And dialects were common throughout England.
Of course.
And the dialect in Leeds was totally different from the dialect in Birmingham. So when I went to Birmingham, I could hardly understand what people were saying around me, and they couldn't understand what I was saying. It took
even more frustrating.
So you
can't find friends.
That's
you don't
right.
have a lot of friends, and you don't understand what the hell people are talking about.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, England is known very well for its
So
lots of dialects.
Yeah.
Lots of dialects.
But that was it at that time.
What about, how does your mother assimilate in Birmingham?
Yes. They were both, my father was a very good bridge player, and there was a bridge club in Birmingham, I don't think it was a Jewish club,
Okay.
but I think it was a club that allowed Jews in.
Okay.
And he was very good. And he used to play bridge for the club, as part of the club team. And he and my mother used to play bridge together. And they went off to this bridge club twice a week. We had a full-time maid at this time.
In the house.
In the house, living in. Well, you say that, but she was the daughter of a miner. Leeds itself wasn't a mining town, but it was surrounded by mining towns. And the miners were very, very poorly paid. And it was a very common thing for the daughters of the miners to go into service, they called it, where you went to live in a house where A, you would get clothes, B, you would get food, C, you get a roof over your head, and a little bit of money to send back to your parents because they were so poor off
So
there.
who was your living cleaning lady?
I remember her very well indeed. She was called Philippa.
Philippa.
And she was very unfortunate because she had one club foot. And she walked with a very big hobble all the time. Very unfortunate. But she looked after me extremely well.
Nice.
I had more attention from Philippa than I did from my own mother. And that's saying something. I had attention from my mother, but more from Philippa.
Interesting.
My parents used to go out at least 2 nights a week and leave me with Philippa.
And your sister?
And my sister would be put to bed. Because at that time I would be...
12, 13?
No, 11, 12.
11, 12.
Not 13. I'll tell you that in a moment. And my sister would be about 7, 5, 6, and she would be put to bed, and I would be left listening to the radio. And my big treat at that time was to listen to the radio at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, where there was a program on called Music Hall, which was with people singing and entertaining and so on. That's my big memory of that. She was allowed to keep me up until 9 o'clock when this program finished.
Nice. And tell me, what about Jewish youth movements in Leeds, in Birmingham?
I didn't know a thing about it.
Nothing.
No connection whatsoever.
No connection.
It was then, I got at this school, this exam. In Birmingham at that time, the best school was a grammar school. Now, I don't know if you understand what a grammar school is in England. This was a school which was founded by Edward VI in 1400 and something. It was a foundation. And this king founded these schools throughout the country. One in Birmingham, one in Manchester, one in Liverpool, one here, one there, one there. But they were very academic schools, very high level stuff. The total number of boys in this school was only 400. And of that, they had a Jewish quota of 10%. Never allowed more than 40 Jews in the school. And I managed to get in. And that was quite something, quite something.
Wow.
What can I tell you about that? The Jews in that school were not called Jews. They were called Hebrews.
Wow.
They were recognized as being separate, recognized as having a separate culture, and all that kind of stuff, but they weren't Jews, they were Hebrews. Because the headmaster said that that's the real name.
Wow. How many Jews were allowed in?
40 only. 40.
So 10%.
Yes, 10%.
10% of the students were allowed to be Jews.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an achievement.
Yeah, it was an
You
achievement.
went to a good school.
A very good school.
Very good school. Did you like your school?
Very much.
Very much.
The story goes on beyond that.
In 1936, I know you're still in Leeds, whatever, in 1936-39, we're going to talk about what's happening in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
The riots break out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys, because of the mandate, do you guys see or read this in the newspapers about what's happening around in the empire? Because that's what you called it.
It was the empire.
The empire, and now it's called the Commonwealth.
Yes.
After the war.
It was the empire.
It was the empire. A, do you hear about this? And B, what do you know about what's happening in Germany? The war hasn't broken out yet, but there's a lot of stuff happening and a lot of anti-Semitism in Germany. We can even, for example, do you remember Kristallnacht?
Not per se,
Okay.
but I do remember, I did know about the Kinder transport.
Kinder transports.
We knew about that because they arrived, large numbers arrived in Leeds.
Not in Birmingham.
Not in Birmingham.
No, in
Well,
Leeds.
in Birmingham we didn't live in the Jewish quarter,
Right.
so
you
we
didn't
don't know what happened,
So you
what
didn't
was
know.
going on there.
You didn't know.
And I had very,
What else do you remember about the rise of Nazism and also the situation in Palestine? Are there any things that come to your memory?
yes,
Okay.
I knew about the things that went on in London with Mosley. Mosley was the leading Nazi. Mosley was the Hitler of England.
So you read about him?
Well, we knew about him. It was talk, common talk. I didn't read the paper at that time. We didn't get a paper at that time, but it was common talk about Mosley and things that went on in Cable Street. And there was other talk about young Jewish men banding together to fight Mosley in the street.
Okay. Well, okay. What was his first name?
Who?
Mosley.
Can't remember.
Oswald.
Oswald. Right?
Oswald, that's right. Oswald Mosley.
Mosley.
One thing you used to get in those days, when you went to the cinema, you used to get the news, the Pathy news, and you got pictures of Mosley and his crew fighting in London and so on.
So there were a group of Jews who were willing to fought him on the streets.
Yes.
You remember that?
Not everyone.
Yeah, but
Not
you remember hearing about it and
I remember hearing about it, certainly.
And at this time, when you're in Birmingham, it's around I'd say 37, 38, 39. Let's talk about right before the war breaks out.
Yes, okay. We're in Birmingham.
You're in Birmingham,
The war broke out in 39.
39. Do you remember, for example, the tensions before the war, in Munich?
Very well.
What's that?
Very well.
Really?
Yes, I remember even to this day when, what was his name?
Chamberlain?
Chamberlain coming back from Munich and getting off the aeroplane and holding a paper in his hand, shouting, "Peace in our time, peace in our time, peace in our time." I remember that particular scene very well indeed.
Really?
Mm.
Let me just turn off my phone. Sorry about that. Do you remember what the mood in the house was in your household around this time when there was a lot of tensions, anti-Semitism in Germany? Do you remember after the Munich Pact, after Chamberlain came out
Yes,
and said, did your parents really believe in it? Did they say anything to you or amongst themselves?
No, I didn't know anything at all about it. I knew it was happening, but there was very little talk that I remember about in the house about it.
But you do remember seeing it probably on the movie.
In those days, if you went to the cinema, every week there was a new news film,
Yeah.
Pathy film, and if you went to the cinema, then you saw these films,
Sure.
and that's where my
Okay, so you remember the memory of it.
Yeah. I think the attitude of parents in those times was not to bother the children.
I'm sorry. I think this is.
You
I just
go
wanted
ahead.
to take this. So let's get to. Is there anything before we start talking about the Second World War?
Mm-hmm.
You're in school. You
Mhm.
like your school.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is kind of okay at home.
Mm-hmm. Reasonable.
Reasonable. You don't belong to any Jewish youth movements in Birmingham?
In Birmingham, not at all.
No, not at all. You don't live in the Jewish area. So the Jewish life in Birmingham kind of disappeared.
Yes.
But in the house, it's still kosher. It's still
That's right.
holidays are observed.
My mother used to go to great extremes to take a bus to the Jewish area to buy her chickens and buy her meat.
Just like she did in Birmingham, in Leeds.
No, at least she used to walk.
She used to walk. So let's talk about your memories from the 1st of September 1939.
Oh boy.
The day World War II breaks out. Do you remember that date?
Yes, very well. Very well indeed.
You're 12.
Sorry?
You're 12 years old. 13?
I'm 12.
You're 12.
Yes, I'm 12 years old. I'm 12 years old in the January, and we're now talking about the September. The school was organised to evacuate. There's a whole school. We were given, well, we're now talking about early August. Yes?
Well, the war broke out on the
Well,
1st of September, but England didn't declare war until the
on
3rd.
the 3rd of September.
3rd of September.
That's right.
But the tensions were high all of August, I'm sure.
Yes,
Do you remember?
yes, this is what I'm saying.
So you remember, like right before the war, you're talking about.
That's right. I'm
Okay.
talking about August before the war, when we were all issued with gas masks and taught how to put them on and so on. And all the arrangements were made for the whole school to be evacuated as a school from Birmingham into the country.
Wow.
We were given lists of clothing and lists of things which we should have ready to take with us, with rucksack and so on. And on September the 1st, the call went out that the school was going to be evacuated. So we all went to school with our mothers, basically with parents. And the whole school lined up in the street in classes. The parents stood on one side. The teachers led each class walking through the streets of Birmingham to the station, to the railway station. The parents were left behind at the school. In the railway station, there was a special train, and the whole school marched along the side of this train and got into the carriages. We didn't know where we were going. Nobody knew where we were going or what it was all about. I think we had sandwiches for one day to eat, and that was it. So we got into the train, and the train started to move. This was about midday, and the train moved a little bit and stopped a little bit, and moved a little bit and stopped a little bit, right the way through till about 6 o'clock at night. We finished up at a town called Monmouth. Monmouth is a very old town on the border of England and Wales. It's a very nice old town. We all kept piled out of there and marched through the streets to a school. And in the school, there was a big school hall. There were the local people who were there to welcome us. And we were going to be allocated to people who volunteered to take us in. They volunteered, they were going to be paid, I think it was something like 5 shillings a week per child.
From who? From the government?
By the government, for maintenance of the child, only for food. And that was it.
And this is on the first day of the war?
No, the war hasn't started yet.
So this is before the war?
This is 2 days before the war started.
So this, okay.
Okay? 2 days before the war started. So I finish up in Monmouth in this big hall. And the names are called out and people are called out. And what kind of a boy would you like? That was how it was. A Christian or whatever it is. And the local people came and they took boys away to house them. Just like that. and some of us were left behind. And we were accommodated that night in a pub, in the rooms above a pub.
Who took you?
We were just taken to the local people. I remember that night very well indeed. Firstly, I've forgotten how many there were of us that were left over after people had taken their pick, as it were. But there must have been about 10 of us in that one room, which is above the pub. But the thing I remember about that was there was a little sports car parked outside the pub. Now in those days you had little sports cars with 2-seaters and a dicky seat at the back, which is closed up and down. And sitting in this dicky seat was the largest dog I've ever seen in my life. It was an Irish wolfhound, and it stood taller than your camera here. Fantastic dog. Just sat there all the time, just looking around. Beautiful, beautiful. And the pubs were then allowed to open, because war was imminent. The pubs were allowed to open all night if they wanted to. You see, until that time, pubs were allowed to open until about 10 o'clock at night. That was closing time. And then everybody had to go. But from that night onwards, from that night, the pubs were allowed to open any time, all the time. And there was a lot of singing and dancing going on down below.
And you're upstairs.
And we're upstairs, working.
And you're like taken away from your parents.
Our parents are miles away now. No parents. No parents. Yeah, for check.
So what happens this evening, in that evening? So you're up in this room above this pub?
We were fed. I don't remember what we were. One of the things that I was told before all this started was that if there is an evacuation and it comes to food, you will eat whatever food is put in front of you to eat, kosher or not. And that instruction came from the rabbis.
Yeah?
Yep. See, very few people have known what a war is really like. When the food is rationed, where you get a limited amount, and it's not what you would choose by any means. And the rabbis gave us that instruction. Whatever is in front of you, you will eat. I remember vividly the first time I ate bacon. I thought the sky would collapse on me.
Really?
Yeah.
The first time was it during this time that you ate bacon for the first time?
That's right. That's right. Or anything, unkosher meat or unkosher food.
So how many kids were evacuated from your school?
About 350.
Wow. Boom, put on trains, boom.
That's
even
right.
Before the war started.
We were evacuated on the 1st, the war started on the 3rd.
On the 3rd. What's going on? What's going on in a 12-year-old kid's mind? When is this traumatic? Is this?
It is traumatic, but you just take it because that's what everybody else is doing, so you do the same. I mean, all your classmates are there with you, and
did you get to say goodbye to your parents?
Now you mention it, I didn't. I said goodbye to my mother at the school because she took me to my mother when my father was at work.
What happens now?
What happens now?
Yeah.
Well, for me, I stayed in that pub just overnight. And next day, 6 of us were taken by car to a farm 2 miles outside of Monmouth. It was exactly 2 miles. The milestone was on the road. You know where a milestone is? It was on the road, right opposite the house. And this was a Welsh, what would you call it? A little farm. A hill farm. Welsh hill farms are a particular character. They're very poor. This one was 60 acres, and it was all very hilly, and virtually all it had for income was sheep. what was it like? It was a big house. It had lots of rooms in it. On the ground floor, there was the big living room, which had the kitchen in it as well, with big stoves, a wood stove, but a big one.
With another 6 kids.
At that time, another 5 kids. Me and 5 others, made 6.
Are they Jewish, these kids? Or?
No, I'm the only Jew.
You're the only Jew. So you get to this farm, and how long are you at this farm for?
3 years. Or just under 3 years. 3 years, say.
Wow, I gotta write this down.
The toilet for this house was a little shed in a bucket at the bottom of the garden.
So you, wait a second. This is something that I need to adapt. So you have new parents, kind of.
Sorry?
You have a new family. Who owns this farm?
The farmer.
Yeah.
Oh no, they don't own it, they rent it.
Okay, but who's living there?
The farmer.
Who is the? Do you remember his name?
Very well. Mrs. Scrivens.
Just a Mrs.
Always Mrs.
No. Anybody else there?
Oh yes,
Husband?
her husband, and a daughter and 2 sons.
And
6 kids.
And 6 other kids.
Yes.
What? So the war breaks out. Do you have any communications with your parents at all?
A letter once a week.
A letter once a week
With
from your mother?
From my father.
From your father?
Didn't hear from my mother at all. My mother came down to visit once.
Okay.
The school laid on buses every Sunday.
What's that?
The school had arranged for buses every Sunday to come from Birmingham to visit. And my mother, during the whole of the time I was there, until she died, came once, and my father came twice. Once was for my bar mitzvah.
We're going to talk about that in a sec.
Okay.
So you spent 3 years there, and you're going to school, right? You're getting an education still.
Oh yes, we're still at the same school.
It's still the same school, but you're in a building somewhere.
What actually happened was there was a very good boarding school, public school in Monmouth, a very old one again, and the 2 schools shared premises. We shared everything. They had the classrooms, for example, if they had the classrooms in the morning one week, we would have the classrooms in the morning the next week.
Okay.
Or if they had classrooms in the afternoon, and so on.
Did the people that you lived with, did they know that you were Jewish? I'm sure they did by your last name.
Probably.
Yeah, probably, but it wasn't an issue.
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think they were that wise.
Okay.
I don't think it ever meant
They had no idea.
They didn't know who a
they
Jew
didn't know.
was.
So let me ask you. So World War II breaks out.
Yes.
Britain and France declare war on Germany.
Yes.
Everybody gets in. The war is beginning.
Yes.
You're in 1940. Now, when do you realize that this is permanent for a while? Like you're staying here?
Right from the word go.
From the beginning, you
Yeah.
understood that?
Yeah. Until the war was over.
Of course, we'll get to that. So you're there at the farm. You said that there's a very interesting story about your bar mitzvah.
Yes. I told you that the headmaster of this school was very conscious of us Hebrews.
Right.
He arranged, there was no Jews in Monmouth that I ever found out. No Jews at all. But he arranged for somebody like a Chabad, somebody. There was Jewish communities in Cardiff and in Swansea.
In Wales, Cardiff
In Wales, yes. And I don't know which one he arranged.
Okay.
He arranged for one of them to come out on every Friday to take us for services on Shabbat.
And what about your bar mitzvah? Like, are you aware that you're...
This is what I'm going to tell you. And my father contacted this guy, and he coached me for my bar mitzvah. And I had my bar mitzvah in a church hall.
In a church?
Church hall.
What's a church hall?
Yeah.
In a church?
No, a church hall.
A church hall. You get the church, and next to the church, most churches have got a hall where they have meetings and things like that, at least in Wales. And that's where I had my bar mitzvah, with an audience of the 40 boys from my school.
The Jewish boys from your school?
That's right, and my father and one or two others who I don't remember very well. And that's about bar mitzvah parties. Forget that.
No bar mitzvah party?
No, nothing at all.
Well, there's a war going on.
Exactly.
Everything's rationed.
Exactly, sir. There's war
But
going
your
on.
father made sure that you had a bar mitzvah.
Yes, he did that.
It was his initiative.
I think so.
Yeah.
It must have been. Nobody else.
Because
did.
normally you can have a bar mitzvah anytime in your life after the age of 13. It doesn't
Yes.
have to be when you're 13, but it normally is for all of us.
Mhm.
But you could have had a bar mitzvah after the war, but he insisted that you have a bar mitzvah,
Oh.
and
He
he
must
made
have-
it happen.
He must have organised it. He must have done. Nobody else would.
Can I interrupt?
Was there any sort of affection at the bar mitzvah between the two of you? Could you see that he was proud, that he was...
No,
No.
nothing at all. The relationship between me and my father was very strange, even at the best of times. I told you, I think he treated me, years later, I realised that he treated me. For example, in this school I was in, it was a very high academic level school. And I would come home and I'd say, I've done very well in maths today, I came first. And he would say, oh, that's good. Why didn't you come first in French? No, he wouldn't even say, that's good. He said, I hear. Why didn't you come first in French? And that was the kind of relationship there was.
You were
Did you say, sorry, so did you say about eating kosher food and what the rabbi said?
Yeah.
I missed all that because I was on the phone.
Well, the rabbi said that it was...
You eat whatever
Yeah,
is
whatever,
put.
yeah.
His words were,
His words-
you eat whatever is put in front of you.
Yeah.
That's the wall.
That was my bar mitzvah.
Let me... Did the other Jewish kids have bar mitzvahs?
That's right, not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge. So you must have felt very lucky.
Well, not to forget that across the range of, there's only 40 boys,
For,
across the range of 6 or 7 classes,
yeah. 350 kids out of 350 kids?
there are only about 2 or 3 boys of my age
Right.
there.
Yeah. What do you remember about this period of you living in this farm in Wales during the war? Is there
Well-
anything significant? I mean, we're going to get to the tragic death of
I
your parents, but
hated it.
you hated it.
The living conditions were,
What about your sister? Where's your sister?
oh, that's another story. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Living conditions in the farmhouse were ghastly. There was the only water tap in the whole house was a cold water tap in the dairy. And when you wanted to get washed or anything like that, that's where you went to get washed. One cold water tap in the dairy. For baths, there were 6 boys, there were later 8. And you had a bath once a week. And you took it in turns to get into the clean water. Okay? So you have this big bath, big galvanized bath in the dairy, which is freezing cold. And you take jugs of hot water. And you start off with the first person into the water has about 6 jugs of hot water. And then when he's finished, the next one to get into the same water has an extra 1 jug, and so on, until you're all through. And you take it in turns to be the first to get into the clean water. The farm was 2 miles of hills like that. So we had to walk, for at least in the early days, had to walk 2 miles up and down hills in all weathers to go to school and come back again.
To get to school.
To get, sorry?
You had to walk 2 miles to get to school.
To get to school.
And the other kids that you're living with who are in your school, are you friends with them? Are you friendly with them?
We are reasonably friendly.
Okay. So you,
Not close friends, but
I
reasonably
understand.
friendly.
I understand.
We're all in the same boat together.
Did you ever experience at any part of this any anti-Semitism?
No.
No.
Never.
Never.
Never. That never.
Excellent. Very good. In 1940, the Battle for Britain
There's
starts.
one more important thing there.
Yes, please.
After I'd been in this farm for about 4 months,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote to my father and told him I couldn't stand it any longer. Please take me away. Please take me home.
Yeah.
He sent that letter to the headmaster. And the headmaster wrote back to him. The headmaster investigated things. And the outcome of that was I stayed there. There was no question of going home. No question of home. And as it happened, it was a very good job.
What's that?
Because the house was bombed. Both my parents were killed.
That saved your life, probably.
It saved my life. And you asked about my sister.
Wait a sec. Wait a sec. Yes, your sister.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And my sister, when I was evacuated, my mother insisted on keeping my sister at home. And what they actually did was they had a kind of little bit of an air raid shelter under the stairs. So at night they used to sleep under the steps because if the bomb did fall, that was the most sheltered place in the house. My grandmother, my mother's mother,
Yep.
was living in Southport. She'd retired to Southport. And my mother's brother, Norman, was in the army, and he was on embarkation leave. Now what that means was that before soldiers were sent abroad, they were given a week's leave to go to their parents, or to go to wherever they wanted to, and say goodbye before they went abroad. So there wasn't time for my uncle to go, my brother's brother, to go and see his mother. So he asked his mother to go to Leeds, where his sisters and the rest of his family were, just to say goodbye. So my grandmother took what was known as an excursion train. It was a train that went there and back in one day, and for a cheap price. So she was living in Southport, and she took this excursion train to Leeds to say goodbye to her son, Norman. And she told me afterwards that when she was in Leeds, she had this sudden impulse not to go back home, but to go to Birmingham to see my mother. She didn't know why, but she just felt it was a strong influence. So instead of going back to Somerset, she went to Birmingham. The air raids were in full force. She saw what was going on. And she persuaded my mother to allow her to take my sister back to Leeds, where it was quiet. And after much to do, my mother agreed. And she also insisted that my mother sack the maid. We had this maid still living in there. And there was no problem for the maid finding jobs. There was plenty of jobs going. So the maid was given a month's salary and sent home. Same day. Not even a week later, the same day. The next day, my grandmother took my sister to Leeds, and the day after, the bomb fell. And if it had been in that house, it had all been wiped out. 8 houses were flattened. It was they call them mines, M-I-N-E-S. They're actually very large explosives attached to parachutes, which come down slowly. And wherever they come down, they blow things, flatten everything. And 8 houses in a row were flattened down to there. Anything in there. I was told afterwards that they were picking up parts of bodies from all over the place around there, from the schoolyard across the road and so on. And they took 2 legs, 2 arms, and whatever, and that was one body, and that was it. Because everything else was unrecognizable.
Is there a date?
Sorry?
Do we know the date?
December the 14th, 1948.
No,
49.
40.
Of the bombing,
The bombing,
when your parents died.
1940.
40.
So
Yes,
it was the 14th
The war broke out.
In September.
in
So-
September 39.
It was the December of that year.
No, not of that year, the following year.
Probably the following year.
It must have been the following year.
So December
December 1940.
40.
It must have been, yes.
1940.
Because you
Okay.
had your
Yeah.
bar mitzvah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. That was it.
How are you given the news?
Oh. I told you about this farmhouse. There was one big living room with a kitchen in it. There was another room which was called the parlour, which was kind of the best room in the house. And that's when the vicar came to visit.
Who?
He would always be shown into that room.
The vicar.
The
This
vicar,
is the vicar?
the vicar, the priest, the local priest, the Christian priest.
Yeah, yeah.
He would be shown into that room and fed his coffee and his biscuits and whatnot, and talk in that room only. So there's that, and it was also, the room was also opened up at Christmas. So one day, I don't know what I was doing, but I was sent for, and the headmaster was seated in this room, and I was told to go in. The headmaster had something to tell me, and he told me in his gentlest possible way that my home had been hit by a bomb. They didn't know whether my mother and father were still alive or not. They were trying to clear the rubble out. They might be buried into the rubble. And he would let me know as soon as he knew. And with that, he gave me a shilling, and he called all the other 6 boys into the room and gave them each a shilling and sent us all off to the pictures, to the films. The same pattern appeared about 3 or 4 days later. When I was sent for, the headmaster was sitting in the parlour, and he said, "I've got some bad news for you. Your mother and father are both being killed," and so on. 1 or 2 words, nice words of sympathy. And they said, "I'll leave you alone just to think about it for a little while." And he left me alone in this room, while he went off to tell the others what had happened. I was left alone for a little while, and then they all came in and, tried to sympathise. And then he gave us all another shilling each and sent us off to the pictures again. That was it. That's how I learned about my parents' death.
You're 13 years old.
But you see, it wasn't as bad for me as it might have been, because not to forget, I hadn't lived with my parents for 1.5 years before that. And that breaks the connections. I mean, it was bad enough.
And you probably would have been dead if you would have lived with
I would have been dead, no doubt about it.
The bomb hit your parents' house at night?
Then, in the middle of the
You
night.
were sleeping, right?
That's right. I mean, 8 houses were flattened. And my sister escaped by the skin of her teeth.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And she's got another story to tell because they never told her that her parents were killed.
So, you're orphaned at 13.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember, I don't know, it could have been many years later, or it could have been many months after, or maybe weeks after, but when it finally hit you, that you actually cried or broke down because of this? Or
I never actually cried or broke down. But the kind of things that used to get me was, for example, in Leeds, there were trams in Leeds. You're travelling on a tram with lots of other people, and you hear somebody coughing exactly the same way as your father used to cough. And you wonder whether he's still alive or not, because you never saw his body. And I wasn't there when they buried them, if they did bury them. And I can't be certain that the bodies lying in those graves are my parents' bodies. Can't be certain at all. Korean bodies. So even today, emotions come up.
Sure.
So there's a gravestone with my mother and father's name on it. That's all. Sorry about that.
It says here on December 12th, 1940. That was the date.
That's right.
Another air raid on Birmingham. A very large landmine bomb was dropped by the Germans on my parents' house. It was big enough to flatten 8 houses in a row. And it killed my mother and father. There was nothing left of my house except for rubble. During this whole time, I felt exactly what I was. An orphan dependent on relatives who do not seem to be very interested in me. In fact, I was an embarrassing burden to them.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you're not living with your family right now. There's the word. You're still in the.
I'm still on the farm.
You're still on the farm.
And they were quite content to leave me on the farm.
Your uncles and aunts, and they didn't want to deal with you.
It wasn't until about 2 or 3 years, 3 years later, that my favourite uncle, my mother's brother, who lived in Leicester, out of the blue decided to invite me.
Please continue. I'm just fixing something in the focus. Please, continue.
He decided to invite me to spend a weekend in Leicester with them. And I turned up on the train, and he met me, and I think he was absolutely shocked with what he saw. I stayed with them for 2 or 3 days, weekend, I remember.
Why was he shocked?
Firstly, because of the language I was using. The language I was using was...
Welsh.
Welsh? No. It was Welsh. It was the lowest form of Welsh you can possibly imagine. Every second adjective was an F word.
Okay.
Every second adjective. And he was a high-powered salesman. We used to live moving in the best quarters and so on.
So you went to go visit your uncle.
Yeah.
Favorite uncle.
Yeah,
your mom's brother.
My mother's brother.
Was he glad to see you?
I don't think he was particularly glad to see me, no. They made me welcome enough. But the most important thing was he took me shopping.
Okay.
And he bought me a suit, which was the first suit I'd had since I was 12 years old. And also he had a lot of influence with me, and he influenced me as to how I should speak and things of that nature. But basically, he was very shocked. And I think it was as a result of that he went to his other relatives in Leeds and told them that I must be taken out of this farmhouse. I think that's it.
And is that what happened?
Eventually, yes. It was about 6 months later. But eventually I was taken out of the farmhouse and I went to live with an uncle and aunt.
To Leeds, right?
Yep.
You're back in your home. You're back in your hometown.
I was back in Leeds.
What's that?
I wouldn't call it a hometown, but I was back in Leeds.
You're back in Leeds. And it is probably towards the end of the war. No, or the middle?
No, far from it. Just let me work it out.
Okay, well, so you're taken back to Leeds.
I'll go back to Leeds.
You're back to Leeds, and you're taken to whose house? To your grandmother's?
No, not at this, not at this stage. To an aunt and uncle's house.
Okay.
My father's sister, who had no children of her own. my Aunt Anne and Uncle Abe,
Your aunt, your father's sister.
my father's
Okay.
sister. Yeah. And
Where are you going to school?
in Leeds.
Where?
At a school in Leeds,
Okay.
Roundhay High School.
Okay.
I made a very big mistake there. I didn't realise the academic level of the school I was in Birmingham was very high.
Okay. In
Um,
Birmingham, yeah.
In Birmingham, it was very
yeah.
high level.
Yeah.
And the headmaster, when he talked to me about transferring schools to Leeds, he wanted me to go to Leeds Grammar School, which is a school up there, and I didn't know that.
Right.
And I went to an ordinary school instead.
Okay.
I told him my father wanted me to go to that school. Not true.
So you're at your aunt's house.
I stayed with them for some months. That wasn't very pleasant.
How come?
Um,
Were they abusive?
no, they just didn't know how to handle children.
Right, because they didn't have
They,
any
they
children.
just didn't have any, and they didn't know. For example, on a Sunday night, they used to go and play poker
Yeah.
at some distant relative's house. And I used to go to the Judean club at that time. And when the club closed down at 9 o'clock, I'd go to where they were playing poker and sit there until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Or just sitting there watching them playing poker.
They didn't care.
They didn't realise. They just didn't realise. They did the best they could for me.
Are you reunited with your sister?
Oh yes, but it's stronger now than...
No, but then.
Then. When you're brought back to Leeds,
Yes?
you're reunited with your sister?
No.
No.
Well, we had nothing in common at all.
But you didn't see her?
Yes, we saw her
Yeah.
occasionally.
Where was she? At your grandmother's?
No, she was living with another aunt.
Okay.
And I just saw her occasionally, that's all.
Okay.
Not reunited at all. Well, I can't tell you any more about that.
Okay, no, that's fine.
One thing I tell you about my sister, they never told her that her parents were dead. And she went through hell.
When did she find out?
When she told me she suspected, but they didn't tell her until she was 21. She had no word of her mother and father from the age of about 7 until then. Go away.
Okay, I'm gonna read here. It says here, I did well in school. I got very good results. I'm reading
Yeah.
out loud what you wrote. In my higher school certificate, and was offered a scholarship in medicine at Leeds University.
Mm-hmm.
Eager to get away from Leeds and the family situation, I took up the Durham.
Durham University.
Okay, so the war is the war over? Is there anything we're gonna?
No, the war's not over yet.
The war's not over yet.
No, it's in its
How old are you when you're offered to go to university?
17.
Wow.
I got my degree at 19.
You didn't tell about moving from your aunt and uncle to your grandmother.
No,
Yeah,
no,
we're
that-
gonna talk about
yes,
that's
Yeah.
thank you. So you're at your uncle's and aunt's, not good there. What happens next?
My grandmother had a house in Leeds, a small house, but she didn't live there. She let it because she was living in Southport.
Right.
And apparently between the relatives, they decided that my grandmother, none of them wanted to keep me. I'm pretty sure of that. What relatives did I have? I had an uncle and aunt who were, he was a solicitor. I had another one who was a pharmacist. And this one, my father's one, who took me in at the start. But they couldn't. And the other two either didn't want to or couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandmother decided to take me in. And she got rid of the tenants in her house,
Mm-hmm.
moved in there herself, and I went to live with her. And that was good. She was a very, very fine lady, very good lady.
Tell me about her.
Tell me about her. She taught me many, many
What was
things.
her name?
Sarah Bloom.
Sarah.
Bloom.
Nice name. Bloom's a beautiful name. And she's your mother's mother.
My mother's mother.
And it's just the two of you living there.
Yes, that's right.
How come your sister doesn't come live with you guys?
Because she's living with his aunts.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're living with your grandmother. How old are you when you moved there? Around 14, 15? Something like that, maybe?
Just a moment. 17, 15.
15. Okay. And how long do you spend with your, how much time do you spend, how long do you live there with your grandmother?
2 years.
3 years.
Two and a half years, something like that.
Okay. So you're living with your grandmother, the war's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you something, not about your personal life. What are you hearing about what's happening in the war?
Oh, you hear the news every day.
Every day.
The important news every day is the 6 o'clock news in the evening. And that's the important news. There's new news every hour.
Yeah.
But that's the important one. And you hear exactly what's going on there. Even on the farm. There was no electricity on the farm, only oil lamps. But they had a wireless with batteries. And the batteries ran down. Every day at 6 o'clock, that wireless was switched on. The radio was switched on. So you could hear the 6 o'clock news. It was a quarter of an hour news, or 20 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
And that was it.
What kind of, you're, 15 years old now, you're at your grandmother's.
Yeah.
It's 1942, 43.
Something like that, yes.
Do we hear anything about what's happening to the Jews in Eastern Europe? Do we have any clue?
Oh yes. Not to the extent that we know today.
Of course.
But we knew that things were very, very bad there.
Do you remember how you found this out? You heard people talking, or do you remember how?
I can't remember. I'm trying to remember and I can't.
Okay. That's okay. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. At the age, is there anything that you want to talk to me about that we haven't talked about from the age of 15 to 17 when you go to university?
Yes, my grandmother.
Okay.
She taught me many things. First of all, she taught me how to keep house.
How to keep the house.
Yes, how to clean and do that. How to cook.
How to cook.
How to dance.
Okay.
How to talk in public. She was a fantastic old lady. I joined a Judean club, which she insisted I join, which was a youth club in Leeds.
What's it called?
Judean. 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 It was a Jewish club, Jewish youth club.
Would you say that maybe this is the first time you're feeling love again when you're with your grandmother?
Wouldn't call it love.
But something.
I needed. It was my place.
What's that?
It was my place, but yet it wasn't. No. No, I didn't feel love.
Okay.
I didn't feel love there at all.
Tell me about
kindness, yet.
kindness.
Yes. Kindness,
Okay.
yes.
It's better than what you had before at
Oh,
the
yes.
farm.
Oh, absolutely.
And with your aunt.
And better than what I had with my aunt. Yeah.
Tell me about the Judean club in Leeds. This is. How old are you?
It took people from 14 to 18.
14 to 18 age. Okay.
It's a Jewish club, 7 days a week.
Seven
7 days a week.
7 days a week, every day.
6 days a week, not Shabbat.
Okay.
With a warden, a full-time warden, who was a very good man. A man called Norman Walsh.
Norman Walsh.
He was the warden of the club, and he ran it. And he ran it very well indeed. I became vice chairman of that club after. And more than that, I became chairman of the Yorkshire Boys Club.
So you're very active in the Judean club in Leeds.
Every night of the week.
Every night of the week.
Almost every
And
night.
tell me, how does this club influence you in your later days when you
How
join
amaz-
the Palmach and come on Aliyah Bet?
That's where I really...
Is the Judean club like the place where you get your identity shaped and
Yes.
your... Tell me about that.
Yes. It went like this. Thursday night in the Judean club was literary night. They had lectures and talks and things like that. I used to go to this. When I came home, my grandmother used to ask me, what happened there today? And did you speak? And if I didn't get up on my feet and speak, say something, even if it was just to ask a question, she used to shout at me. So through her encouragement, I learned to talk in public.
Okay.
And that had a very big influence on my life later, all my life. Because even today I can stand up and talk ad lib. Dancing. Sunday night was a dance in the club to records. And when I used to come home, she used to ask me who I danced with, and how I danced, and what I danced. And if I couldn't do a foxtrot, she'd show me how to do a foxtrot. And if I couldn't do a rumba, she'd show me. And she'd take me, and she'd go like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and so on. That's what that woman did for me.
And tell me more about the Judean club. What do you like? So it's a social club
Oh, yes.
during the war.
Yes.
Any talks? Is this where you also find out about what's happening with in Eastern Europe? But you guys talk about.
No, it wasn't that way. It wasn't that way biased. It was biased as in England. There's a thing called the youth club movement. Four kids aged from 14 to 18, and they do all kinds of things there. People come and talk. There was a chess club. A workshop where you could go and make things, handicrafts.
So no Zionism.
No. If it was Zionism, it was independent.
So at the Judean club, it's just social.
It's social.
Just social.
Yes.
There's no talk about the values of Zionism. There's no talk about Herzl. There's no talk about Jabotinsky.
On a Thursday night was lecture night, and you might get one of that.
Okay.
But you're much more likely to get things of just local interest. Or you get a quiz night, or
I think you told me that.
things of that nature.
So are you active in the Judean club until you're 18? Are you?
Until I went to university
Until
at
you went to
17.
university at 17.
I was very active there until, give or take, 6 months before the exams to get into university.
Because then you studied. You weren't.
I played around all that time until 6 months before. When I realised that 6 months before that if I didn't get a scholarship, I wouldn't get there, I set myself to work 6 hours a night, 6 nights a week, and I did. I used to work from 6 at home in my room from 6 p.m. until midnight, every night except Sunday.
So at age 17, you go to college.
Yep.
And you are studying, what is your profession?
Electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering. Electrical engineering. It is, the war's still going on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the war's still going on. Do you have any thoughts of joining the British Army or forging?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. And in fact, at university...
Where's your university? Is it in Leeds?
No, Durham. Newcastle.
Newcastle?
Yes. It was actually Durham University.
So you moved to Newcastle? Is that it?
Yeah, I lived there. That was my reason for choosing engineering. I could have chosen medicine. If I'd have chosen medicine, I'd have gone to Leeds University, and I would have carried on living in Leeds with my grandmother.
So you just wanted out? You wanted out?
Yeah.
Newcastle?
What actually happened? Durham University is the third oldest university in England. Oxford and Cambridge are the two oldest ones, and Durham is next. But Durham, Newcastle was a very, very big engineering centre. And the big firms in Newcastle had set up this college of Durham University in Newcastle to teach engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught all forms of engineering. It was regarded as one of the best places for engineering in the country. And I lived there in the Hall of Residence.
So you wanted, was life so bad with your grandmother that you wanted to get away from her, or was it just
No,
it was just the whole scene in general that you just didn't, you wanted to? I mean, this to me sounds like a good opportunity to make a new, fresh start.
It was just that.
Yeah.
It was just that.
To reinvent yourself.
The Jewish community in Leeds knew about me because of the things. But because I was living with my grandmother, they thought she was using me as a skivvy to keep her house for her, to clean the house, and so on. That was one aspect, which I hated, because it wasn't like that at all. But that was
the word on the street.
That's right. That was the first thing. The second thing was I was always extremely short of money. All my friends used to be getting something like 10 shillings, a pound a week for pocket money. And I was getting 2 shillings and sixpence. I couldn't get any more. And I just felt not particularly wanted, not quite rejected, but that I had nobody to rely on. I had nobody in whom I could confide. Nobody at all. And nobody tried to. The one who tried to confide in me most was the youth leader, Norman Walsh. He took me in most. The others, my uncles, my aunts, didn't want to know, not really. If they did, they didn't show it in any way.
So, you get to Newcastle, you start studying.
Yep.
How is life at university?
Oh, very good, very good. It was hard work. We did 3 years' work in 2 years. They cut down the holidays enormously, and they spread 3 years' work over 2 years. That's why I got my degree at 19. It should have been 20.
So at the age of 19, you're an electrical engineer.
That's right.
Now,
and I'm going out to
and
work.
you're 17. You're a guy.
That's right.
You know, you're
Teenager.
Yeah, you're a teenager, and you're on your own,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That's right. You see, I had even nobody to advise me. What I could have done, it was, if I'd have taken the scholarship, the Leeds scholarship, and applied it to the engineering thing, I would have had twice the income as I had from the scholarship. But I didn't know anything at all about these things. It was only years later I discovered it, and nobody advised me. Nobody said.
On your own. On your own.
Right from the word go.
Yeah. And I want to try and get. We're going to do about another half an hour, and then we're gonna call it a day.
Yep.
But I want to get to the end of the war
Mm-hmm.
here, and it says here. I wanted to go into electrical power and distribution, part of the industry, so I applied for a graduate
Graduate apprentice.
with the firm called BICC,
That's right.
whose main base was in Prescott,
Prescott.
a small town just outside of Liverpool.
Mm-hmm.
They took me on. This is how I began living in Liverpool in 1947.
That's right.
So, you're in school. Is there anything we need to talk about in your college about Newcastle that we didn't talk about, or is it
There's one thing.
okay?
It was during the war.
Yeah.
they wanted to get as many people into the army as possible.
Yeah.
So the failure rate at the exams was very high.
The what?
A failure rate. There was about 120 boys in the first year of engineering. Of that 120, something like, I don't know the exact figure, something like 60 or something like that, got through to the second year. Okay? They were in the army. Of the 60, something like 20 or 30 got through to the third year. And of that 20, only 9 graduated. And those 9 were met every year from that time onwards, until very recently.
Mm. And you were one of those 9?
I'm one of those 9. I'm getting up to show you something.
Actually, not yet, because you're hooked to the microphone, but we'll do that in a sec. I just want to keep the frame here. There we go.
Actually, you can see it yourself.
What's that?
There's a little thing on the shelf over there.
Okay, we'll get to it in a sec. Yeah, we'll get to it. Okay. So you finish your studies
Mm-hmm. and
you apply for a job.
Yes, I get taken.
Tell me about it, and that you moved to Liverpool.
Graduate apprentice. The idea of professional engineers is that you should get some real. It's all very well having a degree, but you have very little practical experience. So you should spend 2 years on a factory floor, doing whatever is done on the factory floor, sweeping it if necessary, to learn how the other half lives.
Okay.
And so I did that. I took this on.
What year? Okay, so wait a sec. The war's over. Wait a sec. Let's just, before we get to Liverpool, the war is over.
Yes.
The atrocities in Europe are
coming out. Mm-hmm.
What kind of effect does this have on you?
I know I'm a Jew. At that time, I can't say it had any particular effect on me.
It hadn't, okay.
No, because I had a struggle to keep my own life going. I don't think it had any particular effect at that time.
Okay. But you remember V-Day, you remember...
I remember D-Day very well.
Yeah.
Where
were you? You were in Newcastle?
In Newcastle, in college. And we got up to all kinds of student pranks, just steal flags from all over the place to put around where we were living and all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed college. I enjoyed that. But that's all. I didn't have much to do with the Jewish community in Newcastle.
Okay.
A little. I belonged to the Jewish Society at college, but it didn't have next to nothing. There was one occasion where there was a ball. The medical students had their annual ball, and I got dressed up and took a Jewish girl to this ball, but that's another story. Not very important. So that was that. When I left college, I went to live in Prescott. Very important thing happened there. I wanted to live in Liverpool, which was a tram ride away from Prescott. And I had to get to work at a certain time, I had to live in a certain area in Liverpool to get there, to get the tram in the morning. I wanted to get a bed sit. So lots of bed sits advertised in that area. So I get the paper, and every weekend I'm going around from one to another trying to get this bed sit. And every time I knock on somebody's door and they say, yes, we have a room, I say, what's your name? And in those days it was Cyril Goldberg. And as soon as I said Goldberg, the door closed. Time and time again.
This is in Liverpool?
In Liverpool.
This is basically the first time you experienced anti-Semitism?
Direct anti-Semitism. Not the first time. There was a time before that I'd been beaten up in the street in Leeds, which is a very important thing.
Okay, wait a minute.
When I was living with my grandmother during that period.
Hold on. Just for the record, so in Liverpool, you're trying to find a place to live, and nobody will take you in because of your last name.
Because of the last name.
Because you're Jewish.
Yes.
And here, they know. Not like in in the Welsh countryside.
Exactly.
And they slam the door.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
You're taught to accept it. As a young Jew in Leeds, you're taught to keep quiet, keep it down, don't build it up, tolerate it. And that's how it was at that time. The change came. Let me tell you this. Just make this note that I'd been beaten up in the street in Leeds, coming home from the Judean club one night by myself, beaten up and by some yobs who screamed at me, "Go to Palestine, you bloody Jew."
You're just walking down the street, coming
Just walking
back
down the street, and there were about 6 of them, and they pounced on me, and they banged me around, and the screaming all the time was, "Go back to Palestine, we don't want you here, you bloody Jew." And they ran off. Okay. That's not unusual. That was not unusual in Leeds.
What kind of bruises did you have?
Oh, didn't matter. Didn't matter at all.
How did this influence you?
At that time, not at all. But later, when something else happened, when I got into Israel, and they started screaming at me, "Go back to England, you bloody Englishman," then was it.
So it was like the dots connected.
Who am I?
And
What am I?
And we'll get to that story probably in the future.
Yeah.
I just want to write down about this Leeds. So in Liverpool, you are working. Do you finally find an apartment? Apparently you do find an apartment.
Yes, I did finally. Well, yes, I got so fed up of this that there came a point where on the spur of the moment I said, "My name is Cyril Grant," and I got the room. And they were very nice people, actually. They discovered later that my name was really Goldberg.
So you changed your name to Grant?
I had to.
Is that when you changed your name?
That's when I changed my name to
Okay,
Grant.
wait a minute. So this. So when you put it to me in a perspective, you couldn't find a house because of your last name, so you changed your last name. Tell me the story.
Well, I'd been spending weekends going from one advert to another in this particular area of Liverpool, and as soon as I said my name was Goldberg, the room was taken. Until in desperation one day, on the spur of the moment, I said, "My name is Grant, Cyril Grant," and I got the room. So because of that, any mail going through there or anything like that had to have the name Grant on it. So I went to one of my uncles and did a change of name by a process known as deed poll. Deed poll in England. And you can change your name. You just declare it and that's it. And from there on I was known as Cyril Grant. As a matter of interest, they turned out to be very, very nice people. And the people who let me this room, it was a big house and I had a room right at the top. And they lived there. And they were very nice. And when they eventually discovered that my real name was Goldberg, they were puzzled. They couldn't understand why I should change my name. And they were very, very kind to me. Very kind. No matter. Once it was changed, and that was
Of
it.
course. Maybe it's also significant that you changed your name because you're also trying to really start a new life for yourself.
Well, as an engineer, in those days there were very, very few in England Jewish engineers. In the college, I was the only Jew in the electrical engineering department. No, Jews were not kind of acknowledged. They thought an engineer was somebody who fixed their car when it went wrong. They didn't know. Jewish society in Leeds was very narrow indeed. Very narrow. It still is to this day. I have virtually no communication with my relatives in Leeds whatsoever. I have relatives there. I've seen so much of the world and so much of a variety of things. We have nothing in common. Even with my sister, I have extremely little in common.
Till today.
We talk about our parents. Doesn't really mean anything. And we don't talk about that very much.
You're in Liverpool not for a long time. Is that correct?
So say again?
You get to Liverpool in 1947?
Actually in 46. 47, something like that. Something like that. But in Liverpool, you see, I made contact with the Jewish community.
Okay.
Could go to shul there, could go to the Jewish social things and so on. And that was good. That was very good indeed.
Before we talk, we're going to talk about the Jewish community in a second.
Go
You
away.
like your job?
Sorry?
You like your new job?
Did I like my job? No.
Yeah, you like it.
No, it was a waste of time.
It was
The factory I was working at was
it was a waste of time.
was a massive factory, very big. It had about 8 different canteens, for food for the workers. You could get a good meal there for like a shilling. So me and the other guys who were on the same kind of course as me, we developed a thing. Work used to start at something like 7 o'clock in the morning. So you get to the factory at 7 o'clock in the morning, you'd go to wherever you were supposed to be working, made contact with your foreman, and said, I'm going for a walk. And you would go to one of the canteens and have breakfast. This is when you're supposed to be working. The second canteen would start somewhere about, the first one would start at somewhere about 7, next one would start somewhere about 8. So you go from one to the other and have a meal in 8, or just have a cup of coffee in canteen number 2. And then you go to canteen number 3. And by the time you got back to where you were supposed to be, it was lunchtime. So you go to another canteen.
Socialism.
I learned how to skive.
What does skive mean?
Avoid working. Avoid the bosses. Avoid working. And when I was employing people, they were amazed that I knew exactly what they were doing all the time, because I'd done it.
So tell me about the Jewish life that you got back into in Liverpool.
It wasn't very much, but it was social.
Social, yeah.
Yeah, and I could go to shul if I wanted to. And there were social evenings. I can't remember exactly how and where, but there were definitely social evenings and lectures and that kind of thing that I used to go to.
You're meeting people, you're meeting fellow Jews, you're meeting,
Not many, but a few.
Okay. Because Liverpool, I'm sure, has a big community of
It has, and outside Liverpool as well.
Yeah. It's a big city.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
And before we get to you, we're going to start with this tomorrow, with the whole issue of you deciding to come to Palestine. No, this is good. We went over your background, and like I said to you on the phone, This interviews are, we take it slow. As much details as we can get are good, and I think what we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to actually start with you making contact or thinking about making contact where the thing started in your mind that you want to do something else with your life, you want to go somewhere else.
No, it wasn't that.
Okay.
It wasn't that. It was like this. I heard what was going on. I heard that the United Nations were considering dividing Palestine in two, and it was in November 47.
Well, the resolution passed on November 29th, 1947. But you heard. Okay, so actually, let me put it this way. What after the war? There's a lot of crazy stuff going on here in Palestine with the British.
No contact, very little contact.
Do you know what's going on here with the Holocaust survivors being turned back?
Yes, oh yes.
Do you know about the Stern Gang?
Yes, the Stern Gang. Yes, yeah.
Do you hear about this in Liverpool?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, all of that. And
is there anything in the blowing up of the King David Hotel?
I heard about that too.
Yeah.
No, I heard about all that.
Sure.
But I still had, at that point, up till that point, I had no intention of coming here.
Okay.
No idea what I was going to do.
Okay.
But when the United Nations declared that there was going to be an Israeli state, and the fighting started.
The day after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm a young engineer. I'm an orphan. I haven't got nobody for whom I have nobody for whom I am responsible, and nobody really cares whether I live or not. So I should be amongst the ones, I felt, who should go there prepared to die if necessary. My exact thoughts were that if I go there and I get killed, there's nobody to care for me. Nobody will mourn me.
Is that really, that was the deal maker?
Yeah. And that was it. And also, they needed engineers.
How do you know?
Because in the people I met in the Jewish things there, I heard that way. I heard.
So tell me, in Liverpool after the war, in 1947, is there, are you guys talking about this in your circles with friends? About Palestine?
I had no
about
friends.
What's happening? No, with your Jewish friends?
No.
No.
No, hardly at all. Hardly at all.
So
but what actually happened was this, that the Palmach sent a guy to Liverpool.
Wait a sec. Before we get to this guy who's the Palmach, let me just get this correct. Before the UN partition of Palestine, you're not even thinking of coming here.
Not at all.
After the partition and the fighting breaks out the next day, that's the moment.
That's the trigger.
That's the trigger. Can you tell me something about that moment that you remember?
Not really. I know I was by myself.
Did you listen to it on the radio?
No.
Okay.
No, I knew it from the show and whatnot. And I knew that I just had this thought that people are going to die there, and who should go, to help or to die. It was very, very much a question of I'm a loner. Nobody cares. If I should die at that time, if fighting there, whatever it may be, nobody will be inconvenienced in any way. So I'll go. If I go, maybe somebody won't go.
Is that when you decide to so what do you do the following day after the declaration, after the vote in the UN and the fighting breaks out? What do you do?
I passed the word around amongst people I knew in shul that I was willing and anxious and to go. And I can't quite remember how, but I made contact with this guy that Palmach had sent to Liverpool to recruit.
Do you remember his name?
No. No.
Was he a Sabra?
Yes, he was. He was a Sabra, that I know. But I don't remember his name. And I think it was good because names, even if it was his name, it wouldn't be his real name.
Of course. But so you decide that you're going to do this.
Mm.
Do you consult anybody?
No.
Nobody to consult.
Who is there to consult?
And you're willing to change your whole lifestyle and not stop being an engineer. You're going to use your profession is needed in the war effort.
That's right.
Yeah.
I knew I was needed there. And that was it. I didn't quite finish my course. I committed for 2 years on this graduate apprenticeship course, doing all these things. And I didn't quite finish that. And I had to go to the guy and tell him.
What'd you tell him?
I told him that I'm a Jew, and I'm going to Palestine to fight for the Jews. That's it. And he said, I wish you well. That was it.
And you spread the word around in Liverpool?
I first just...
I mean, what do? You put up notes? Or?
No. You go to... I can't tell you exactly how it happened, but as if I went to a meeting. And during the course of that meeting, I'm talking to various people. I'm saying, I'm willing to go. I'm ready to go. I'm an engineer. And the word got around. So I can't remember exactly how it happened, but this guy from... he contacted me. And I met him privately. Just here now, somewhere. I can't remember where. And he interviewed me. And he questioned me.
Do you remember the interview?
I remember I felt so embarrassed because he wanted to know all my details, where my family was, who my father was, who my mother was, and everything else, to make absolutely certain that I was who I said I was.
Okay, and we are going to pick up from here the next time we meet, from this moment, when you meet the Palmach contact in Liverpool.
Yes.
And now I'm going to turn off the camera and we're going to figure out when we're going to meet again.
Okay, right, so be it. So be it.